Of how important he is. And I've been shouting that this is the guy who will be the future Putin of Iran if you don't do anything about it.
Still, we don't know who signed the visa for this guy in Ottawa. Somebody has done that.
Now we can't wear the beloved Shiro Khorshid, or we can't hold the flag thanks to FIFA.
For a lot of the Iranian Canadian community can see the 21-year-old driving the McLaren down Yonge Street and go, well, that guy's got to be the son of so-and-so, right?
Like, where did this money that they bring here come from? Does it come from a salary, or is it coming from the oil revenue stolen from the Iranian people?
This system is broken. It's not functioning anymore, and it needs fundamental changes.
It's not that they don't understand. It's not that they are inactive.
It's not a case of naivete. You're saying
it's not a case of naivete. They exactly not know what's going on. It's not to their benefit because they see short-term political benefit and they prefer that to their long-term benefit of the country.
Hi there. Who let the mullahs in? I'm speaking to you from Toronto, and Canada officially lists the IRGC as a terrorist entity. Remember that? The Islamic Republic regime is officially a terrorist entity. And yet many Iranians here are increasingly aware that members of that same regime apparatus, or people connected to it, continue finding their way into this country. So naturally, the question needs to be asked from the standpoint of safety and consistency and legality, who let the mullahs in? And maybe the answer is more uncomfortable than some kind of incompetence. Maybe this is not simply about loopholes either, but rather incentives. Because, of course, the Islamic Republic is not just an ideology, it's a network, a wealthy one, and a connected network with money to move, influence to trade, relationships to cultivate, and narratives to market. And modern Western democracies have become strangely vulnerable to narratives, especially fashionable ones. We now live in a political culture where even the most reactionary Islamist forces can sometimes hide behind the language of anti-imperialism, multicultural sensitivity, identity politics, or religious protection. That's right. Criticize the regime too strongly, and someone somewhere will try to frame you as the problem. Who let the mullahs in, indeed? Meanwhile, those who have actually suffered under the Islamic regime, dissidents, minorities, women, journalists, political prisoners, queer people, secular activists, are often asked to lower their voices so nobody feels uncomfortable. Who let the mullahs in? Well, it appears to have happened not just through airports, but institutions and lobbying and intellectual cowardice, and through moral confusion, through a Western political culture that sometimes seems more fluent in performative activism than in recognizing authoritarianism when it arrives wearing religious clothing. And then there is money, real estate, business, investment, donations, influence, access. The children of power brokers from authoritarian regimes do not arrive in the West accidentally. They arrive because somebody benefits. So then, this is not merely an immigration conversation. It's a question about whether Western democracies still possess the moral clarity to recognize enemies of freedom before those enemies become comfortable inside freedom itself. Iranians fled the Islamic Republic believing democracy meant distance from tyranny. But increasingly, many are looking around cities like Toronto and Vancouver and asking themselves a chilling question: did the regime follow us here? Who let the mullahs in? And is there the political will in this country and the strength in the Iranian Canadian diaspora to make the case that this needs to stop? It's May 28, 2026. This is Roqe. Hi there, welcome to episode 443 of Roqe, Iran Rises. I'm Jian Ghomeshi. Hello to you from Toronto, Canada. Salam dostan aziz. Durud bar shoma. Hope you are doing okay. Wherever you're tuning in from around the world, we hope you are okay. This is the 39th episode in our Iran Rises series, and this one entitled, Who Let the Mullahs In? Now, once again, events inside Iran and around the Iranian diaspora are moving at a breakneck speed. There's a new news bulletin every few minutes. So we should note that we are recording this episode at approximately 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time here in Toronto on this Thursday, May 28th. That's around midnight in Iran. And as always, we're sharing perspectives and conversations as up to date as humanly possible. We do our best. Just before we get going, if you do appreciate our independent programming and or you want to support us in any way, you can do so on YouTube. If you're listening to us on a podcast channel, you can go to YouTube, watch the show, and if you like what we do as alternative independent media, just hit the super thanks button on the main page there of YouTube while you're watching the show. Super thanks, and you can contribute to keeping Roqe alive and thriving. Any amounts is welcome. We appreciate you. All right. On this 443rd edition episode of Roqe, the IRGC is, as you may know, officially listed as a terrorist organization in Canada. I'm going to have to apologize to people who are watching us in different parts of the world. This is going to be a Canada-centric conversation, but it's a conversation that probably mirrors your experience in other parts of the world as well, if you're in the UK, if you're in Australia, etc. The IRGC is listed as a terrorist organization now in Canada. The Islamic Republic regime has spent decades, as we all know, brutalizing the Iranian people, imprisoning dissidents, killing protesters, exporting extremism, forcing millions of Iranians to flee their homeland in search of freedom and safety elsewhere, including here in Canada. Canadians know this about the IRGC. Iranians know this. The Canadian government says it knows this too, and yet somehow reports continue surfacing about regime-connected figures, relatives of powerful insiders, and even individuals tied to the IRGC directly entering this country. Some allegedly studying here, some investing here, some quietly building new lives in the very place so many others escape to. So how is this happening? Who is being vetted? Who is being missed? And has Canada fundamentally failed to understand the nature of the Islamic Republic regime? What does the IRGC on the terrorist list even mean? On this edition of Roqe, a provocative and, we think, important conversation about immigration, loopholes, security, morality, accountability, and the question many Iranian Canadians are asking now: who let the mullahs in? We've got a strong panel featuring Toronto lawyer and commentator Sadeq Bigdeli, musical artist and immigration consultant Mehran Aminian, and human rights advocate and Dr. Avideh Motmaenfar. Let's get to it. Let me tell you about Stellar Law. Today's episode of Roqe is brought to you in part by Stellar Law. Stellar Law is a boutique litigation firm based in Toronto, founded and led by Rana Nosrat Pana. This firm represents businesses and professionals in commercial and contractual disputes, particularly where relationships have broken down and the consequences are significant and you need good lawyers. Stellar Law's practice is grounded in careful analysis and strategic decision making. Much of the work involves contract disputes, shareholder conflicts, complex business disagreements that require both legal precision and practical judgment. Now, Rana and her team are known for approaching these matters with clarity, with focus, and a deep understanding of what is at stake for their clients. For those navigating serious disputes with real commercial impact, check out Stellar Law at stellarlaw.ca. Stellarlaw.ca. Thanks again to Rana Nosrat and her team at Stellar Law. If you are Iranian, do note that Stellar Law operates in both English and in Persian as well, if you prefer to deal in Persian. Let me tell you about FamLuxy. This episode of Roqe is brought to you with the support of FamLuxy. FamLuxy is a cultural fashion platform dedicated to supporting and showcasing independent Iranian artists. So in a time when Iranian voices and creativity have faced unprecedented challenges, FamLuxy has been a bridge, bringing the spirit of Iranian craftsmanship to the world. Every creation tells a story of art, culture, and individuality. You have to see these pieces. By choosing FamLuxy, you are supporting independent artists and meaningful design. In 2023, FamLuxy introduced its exclusive collection, Glory Days, at New York Fashion Week, featuring the King and Queen line, an artistic tribute to 2,500 years of Iranian imperial heritage and the timeless strength of our culture. You need to get one of these items if you haven't done so already. You can discover more and order your own FamLuxy wear at famluxy.com. Be unique by FamLuxy. Go to famluxy.com. Thanks to FamLuxy for honoring heritage, for amplifying art, and for standing with Iranians. All right, let's get to our panel. He is an artist and social activist whose music over the past decade has focused heavily on the socio-political situation in Iran and the voice of the Iranian people. He's also a regulated Canadian immigration consultant and the CEO of Bloomington Immigration Services. Mehran Aminian joins us from Toronto. She is an osteopathic practitioner, journalist, political commentator, and longtime advocate for human rights and democratic values within the Iranian Canadian community. Born with deep roots in Iranian culture and shaped by the experience of the Islamic Revolution, she has become a vocal critic of the Islamic Republic, writing extensively on Iran and Middle Eastern affairs for a range of international publications and serving as the president of the Council of Iranian Canadians. Her advocacy has made her both a prominent voice and at times a target. Avideh Motmaenfar joins us from Oakville, Ontario, and he is a Toronto-based lawyer, but his work and his voice reach far beyond the courtroom. Over the past months, he has emerged as a clear and uncompromising advocate for Iranian human rights, challenging disinformation, calling out legal and moral evasions, and translating outrage into arguments grounded in law and principle. He also knows the regime of the Islamic Republic all too well, having spent some time within that system, and can give us precious insights as such. Sadeq Bigdeli joins us from Toronto. Hello to you all.
Hi there.
Hey.
It's great to have you on, Avideh, for the first time. Nice to see you again, Mehran and Sadeq. So this is an episode we've been wanting to do for a while. Let me start with the obvious question that I think a lot of people are asking in this country, and this probably mirrors different situations across the diaspora in other countries as well. Canada officially listed the IRGC as a terrorist entity. So the obvious question, if that's true, how are people connected to the regime still entering Canada at all? Is this a failure of policy or a failure of enforcement? Sadeq.
It is both. It is a failure of policy because when we advocated for this listing, what we had in mind was to for the members of the IRGC to be enlisted, and that definitely needs some levels of scrutiny. You have to find these guys. Instead of that, the policy was so broad and not targeted, and there was no implementation mechanism. For example, designating a unit for understanding who these people are. Instead of that, it diverted from the members to the conscripts, which has become a big issue. And my fear is that these days, when the opposition Conservative Party talks about 700 or a few hundred people, IRGC members roaming around the streets of Canada, what they mean by that, I'm not sure, but it might be those conscripts rather than the real members who might be hidden, who might not even be known to the government because they haven't really investigated it, and there's no unit for the Iranian Canadians reporting these people, and there's no action, real action taken by the government on that front. So my concern, serious concern, is that the government is not serious about pursuing.
Just explain to me the difference between conscripts and members, what those two things are.
So hundreds of thousands of Iranian male, everybody over the age of 18, need to go to conscription draft, and they get divided between the Artesh, the army, the IRGC, or the police force. Okay, so a lot of these people, a lot of people have been conscripts over the past few years. It's a mandatory service, and there has been a huge issue with respect to those families of Iranian male who have in the past served as a conscript. The government of Canada considers them as a member of a terrorist organization, which is 100% false. They recognize that, but it's been lots of legal litigation cases at the Immigration Division of the IRB, Immigration Refugee Board, regarding that. So my concern, apart from the concern of these families, is they are diverting the issue from the real members, the terrorists, to these people so that they can tell that we have made an achievement and we just need to deport these families rather than really targeting the real terrorists, the members of the IRGC who we don't know even where they are, how many of them are here, and there's no reporting mechanism, there's no unit investigating this, and that's the real, the little energy that there is being wasted on something that is really a just cause. It's just not the real threat.
Okay, yeah. IRGC on the terrorist list, all the, for what did at least make it into the media, but certainly in social media from Iranian Canadians about the last few months and the massacres, etc. Avideh, how are people connected to this regime still entering Canada? Failure of policy or failure of enforcement?
I think also it's a little bit of both, because for the past 9 years, the Iranian community had begged Ottawa to list the IRGC as a terrorist entity, and we were told that it was complicated, it was under review, it's being studied, and for all these years, the regime used that delay to move money, move people, and move influence into this country. And when Canada finally listed the IRGC in 2024, it was almost a decade after the United States did that. So I think that delay allowed the regime to really implement themselves into Canada, and also the cabinet ministers who delayed the IRGC listing after the motion passed in the House of Commons. That influenced also, the non-really implementing of the law. The MPs who took, the photo ops and immigration officials who didn't ask the hard questions. Lawyers who took the money and didn't ask where the money came from. All these lack of implementation of the law, I think, in successive governments, liberals primarily, but not only, that wanted to engage more with the Iranian people rather than keeping Iranian Canadians safe. And the political culture of this country, I must say, doesn't matter which party is in power, that decided that the Iranian Canadian community warnings were inconvenient.
Right. I'll get to that. That's those are important reminders. Let me just get Mehran on this opening question. You say what?
Well, I kind of agree with both Avideh and Sadeq, but I have to disagree with Avideh in one part, that ultimately the Liberal government implemented the new law or regulation, but they half-assed it, because I think all governments are somehow as far as bureaucracy, they get stuck in the bureaucracy part of the issue. Liberals even more so. So they passed the law finally. They basically enlisted IRGC as a terrorist organization. Fantastic. But they didn't they didn't finish the job the way they had to. Like when you list an organization, an armed organization, as a terrorist organization, then you have to basically have clear guidelines for your officers with boots on the ground. We actually talked at length with Sadeq about this issue. It's pretty simple. I don't get to legality of it because I'm not a lawyer, but it's as far as immigration goes, and we have many examples that you could, as a minister, you can just have a ministerial guidelines sent out to all your visa offices, all the hubs around the world, and actually to tell them how to implement the law. So they did that. They basically did the good job of putting IRGC in that list. but they didn't explain to their officers how to implement this. So they don't put, because the way it's happening right now, it's actually quite counterproductive. It's reversed. It's not targeting the IRGC top commanders or officials. Rather, obviously, except for those people who are named in the sanction list, but rather it's actually, as Sadeq mentioned, it just targets people who had no choice, because in Iran, if you want to get on with your life after, when you, as a male citizen, you have to complete that two-year compulsory military service, and then only then you can basically be entitled to certain social services. So they did that a bit later than what we expected, as Avideh mentioned. But yet the liberal government managed to do that, but they didn't finish the job. And still, it's not too late to fix that, which is a major issue, in my opinion.
It's something that I don't understand, that maybe you guys can shed some light on. Is in an age where, I like to just say there's no privacy anymore. Every time we use a credit card or go online, all of our information is somebody's overseeing it. Maybe it's Jeff Bezos or whoever's out there, including governments and states and security or institutions, etc. How is it this difficult to distinguish between Iranians coming here, trying to find a safe space, fleeing Iran or coming as legal immigrants, etc., and people who are connected to the regime that, for a lot of the Iranian Canadian community, can see the 21-year-old driving the McLaren down Yonge Street and go, well, that guy's got to be the son of so-and-so, right? How is this so difficult, Sadeq?
It is not difficult. It's very easy. There's a lack of political will. Why do I say that? Because you just simply look at the streets of Toronto, seeing these people obviously waving the flag of a terrorist state along with other terrorist organization, doing car rallies, waving the pictures of that terrorist, the father of terrorists in Iran, Khamenei, who got just decimated and killed, and nobody has anything to do with them. It's just part of the so-called toleration, liberal tolerance culture, which has got us to this situation where there's rise of anti-Semitism, there's rise of Islamic radicalism. And so I can't tell you anything other than the fact that this mindset that the current liberals have, it's different from the liberals in the 90s. This mindset is providing the fertile ground for this kind of situation we are in. So lack of political will, and maybe even if we want to think a little bit, viciously, there's some sort of a perverse intention to get them in. They have the money, they have political power, they usually vote liberal or the far left. So it's really something vicious going on. I'm sorry to say that.
Mehran, this is what you do as an occupation. Do you agree with that this is that simple, and that there's something nefarious about just letting in regime-connected people?
To some extent. We have to remember one thing, that, okay, if you want to apply for any kind of permanent residence in Canada, one of the main documents that you have to submit is your police clearance certificate from your home country, namely Iran, right? And they obviously, IRGC will do their due diligence, and they actually do the background checks, usually like with Interpol, let's say FBI, other regular, like the same authorities around the globe. But that's one of the documents that you have to submit. So basically, you have to show that you have no criminal record in your home country, and then you have to submit, if you, as a male citizen, you have to submit your military service card, your military service exemption card. The point I'm trying to get at is that, imagine this: as a IRGC commander, how easy. It's fairly easy. It's actually quite easy to I don't want to say falsify documents, but how easy is it for them to obtain, uh, let's say, a military service exemption card? I never, served. Or, for example, I think that you saw in the news
Yeah,
the
but that's
recent.
that stuff can't be weeded out. I mean, is our are our immigration security officials, not to disparage them, but are they that weak that they can't?
I would suggest so. So let me just add this to my argument. Just quite recently, and it's about two different countries. Yeah, the U.S. Delegate who went to China. Have you heard that? Because Marco Rubio was on the sanction list in China, and they actually changed the spelling of Marco Rubio's, the secretary of the basically a minister, or they changed it, and I think in Chinese that would to read something like Lubio instead of Rubio, and and it blew my mind that we are talking about U.S., China, and Marco Rubio. And if that technique would work there, I don't see why it's not applicable to our discussion today here.
Okay, Avideh, it was only about a month ago that I guess that senior members of the Team Iran, Team Melli Football Federation, connected to the IRGC, former commander, landed in Canada, and then, based on some pushback, ended up leaving. But what do you feel that exposed about how strongly the IRGC on the terrorist list is being enforced here in Canada?
Well, I think the only reason that Trudeau finally accepted to list IRGC and implement it, so-called implementation, because it is not, obviously, was a political reason. There was a by-election going on in Toronto, and there was a riding with a majority Jewish residents, and he wanted to prove that he would care about their safety and security. It was post October 7th, and the only reason he finally did it was trying to win that by-election, and that he actually lost. So if that by-election didn't happen, as we speak, the IRGC wouldn't be officially listed. So I believe that the regime doesn't only operate through agents in trench coats. It operates through networks of the so-called community organizations, cultural centers, religious institutions that, and sometimes their funding come from Tehran. Iranian Canadians know exactly which institutions we are talking about. And we have been pointing them out for 20 years, but successive governments treated us as we were paranoid, and we were not. We were right. And I think that the real problem is that there is influence of the regime here, and they bypass political decisions. They bypass a visa decision. Like, still, we don't know who signed the visa for this guy in Ottawa. Somebody has done that, but no name was named.
Mehran, can you just weigh in on that football situation?
Yeah.
What did you make of that?
What pains me terribly in this very scenario, on this very topic, is that you have to understand the concepts of TRV and TRP. So if this guy Mehdi Taj, if he was issued a temporary resident visa, which we call it a visa, that's how we refer to it, that would have been less painful to someone like me. But when someone is, for whatever reason, if someone is found inadmissible to Canada, so basically they cannot travel to Canada under normal circumstances, they by the officer discretion, the officer can issue a TRP, temporary resident permit. So it shows that this guy was found inadmissible. Sadeq, please correct me if I'm wrong, because I think that's the case here. And someone thought, we can't let this guy in, so let's just issue a temporary resident permit so he can enter Canada. If you want to be, if you want to give the officer benefit of the doubt, he might have thought that okay, he's the head of the Football Association of Iran, and he's planning to attend a FIFA or basically event, which supposedly FIFA is a non-political organization. As we can see, it's not even the fact. Now we can't wear the beloved Shiro Khorshid, or we can hold the flag thanks to FIFA. But my point is that the fact that he was found inadmissible and then somebody issued a temporary resident permit to let him in, that's the painful part for me. I really want to get to the bottom of this. And it's funny that when I saw.
But do you feel like that's an act of omission or an act of commission? In other words, you think that somebody intentionally said, no, let the terrorist in?
Well, it was intentional because TRP is discretionary, But is it? This is $1 million question here, honestly. Maybe Sadeq can elaborate.
Let me just come back to Avideh because you mentioned that the by-election and on a political sort of level in Canada. First of all, when we hear about hundreds of individuals, and many people think it's much more than this, who are directly connected to the regime or the IRGC roaming around in Canada, what kind of message does that send to the Iranian Canadian community that are here and are here legally and are active citizens? But I suppose more directly as a result of that, then, why doesn't the Iranian Canadian community have more political sway at this point? I mean, if we're in the hundreds of thousands, particularly in urban areas like Toronto, the Greater Toronto Area, Vancouver, Montreal, Calgary, wouldn't it be at this point smart political practice? I know they got the kickbacks or they get some money or they do some deals in the past with regime connected individuals, but at this point, wouldn't it make political sense if you're running for office to do the thing that the Iranian Canadian would be asking for or would want?
Well, I'm not sure how to explain that problem. You know that I ran for the Conservative Party.
It's part of why I'm asking you, yeah.
Yes. So as soon as I think there is a lack of political awareness in the Iranian community and how important that political influence is. I lived it. I went through hell and back when I was running as a candidate because no support from the Iranian community came for me. And if anything, I was hit by a lawsuit that probably the Iranian regime hired to sue me, a completely vexatious, lawsuit that. And then accompanied by an online campaign of defamation that basically ruined my political aspirations. And I did that because I knew that having political influence is very important, and Iranians don't have any in this country. When I saw that how other communities, for example, supported their candidates, and it didn't matter what that candidate stand for, as long as it was from the country where that community was coming from, they wanted to have the influence, have somebody in the House of Commons to advocate for them. So I think that so
you think it's a failure you think it's a failure of our community to a certain extent for not rallying together and sort of making these. I mean, because this one's a no-brainer that I would think most of the community can get behind. That the IRGC is not our friend nor anyone connected to it.
No, absolutely. I think that's a failure of the community. I don't know, for whatever reason, the Iranian community gets triggered very easily by the games of the Iranian regime. In my case, particularly, I can talk about it because I lived it. So they started by defaming me, trying to defame me, and to create a controversy that I was somehow against Shahzadeh Reza Pahlavi. But if you go, as long as you go back, my history is documented as a supporter of Shahzadeh, even when it was not trendy to be a supporter of Shahzadeh. But they started by that, and then triggered the friends and foes were against me for some reason. I woke up one day and my social media was full of attacks. I couldn't even understand why. And then, followed by other more important attacks. Even my daughter was followed by elements of the Islamic regime in Canada. I was intimidated at my door, at my home. So everything that the regime planned to do, they succeeded because there was absolutely no support from the community.
Sadeq, is it really, do politicians kind of game this out in Canada and say it's not, but it doesn't really benefit them, it's not politically advantageous to do something that the Iranian Canadian community would be aching for, begging for?
Okay. Just quickly to weigh in on the Taj situation, the fact, as exactly my friend mentioned, Mehran, the fact that they issue a TRP means that this guy was inadmissible, and this guy was inadmissible because they knew that he was a top IRGC commander. So that's for sure. Okay. So it was a FIFA thing going on, whatever it was. It was really shameful. Now, on Avideh's point about the problem within the Iranian community, I mean, we did make some achievements in the previous election in one of the ridings, for example, Richmond Hill, when we said enough is enough. We don't care what is the original nationality of the candidate. They went for another candidate who is now serving more, or trying to show that he really does care about the Iranian community, rather than somebody who was deemed to be associated with the interest of the Islamic Republic. So there is some success story there, but it's really unfortunate what happened to Avideh. And why does that happen? Your question, because first of all, in terms of the unity among the Iranian community, I think we have something called negative unity as opposed to positive unity. So we're really good at opposing something negatively, saying no to something like the Islamic Republic, the killers that did the massacres. You see, then we broke some really great records in the streets of Toronto, Vancouver. So we are really great on that, and we should bank on it. But we can never build anything. The moment we start, having to show some positive unity, creating a project, people start infighting. Who is the boss? Who is doing that? Why? People start accusing each other of being associated with Islamic Republic, questioning each other. We are terrible at doing that. And the last but not the least, what I mentioned at the beginning, let me just be more clear. And it's not only limited to Canada, it's the same with the UK, like left, center, what used to be center-left parties. There's benefit in them politically, at least not to oppose or not to minimize these portion of the populations, the pro-Islamist type, because they get votes from them. That's the vicious thing. It's not that they don't understand. It's not that they are inactive.
It's not a case of naivete. You're saying
it's not a case of naivete. They exactly know what's going on. It's not to their benefit, because they see short-term political benefit, and they prefer that to their long-term benefit of the country.
That's devastating.
Oh yeah. That's the problem with the whole world. The way that the Western democracy is losing its liberal values, only banking on the majority voting, and they're bringing in immigrants from anywhere, regardless of whether these immigrants share the liberal values of the societies they immigrate to. I mean,
and more directly for the Iranian community, the Iranian Canadian community, there are legitimate safety and security issues associated with this. I would imagine you would know that intimately, Avideh, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you want to speak to that at all? I mean, that what the real implications are. I mean, if somebody's sitting out there saying, "What's the big deal?" Especially when we get to family members of IRGC, etc. And I'll ask you a question about that in a moment. But if somebody's saying, "What is the big deal here?" Your answer to them would be what?
Well, the big deal is that if the government does not act when the regime kills, for example, Canadians out of the sky. I'm talking about the PS 752. Of course, the regime believes that they can operate easily without impunity, and do whatever they want. So the mullahs read that signal loud and clear, and so they try to, bank on that influence in democratic countries, and then take over, because that's the ultimate goal. So it is a big deal, and the politicians in Canada, at least, and I agree with Sadeq, is everywhere. Is not just is more in most democratic countries. We are drowning, whether we want it or not, in this ideology of woke, that we have to be understanding, inclusive, even into elements that would like to come here and kill us or destroy us. So it's a real issue. We can talk about it forever.
Okay. I couldn't find, I was canvassing opinion to see if we could find somebody who was making the argument that regime officials should be allowed into Canada and should stay here. I didn't find that, but I did find some interesting arguments. Some people argue that relatives of regime officials, so children, spouses, extended family, should not automatically be blamed for the actions of their parents or relatives. You guys are probably used to these arguments. And some, they say that these family networks often benefited directly from corruption and repression, but these people have nothing, to do with that. Where should Canada draw the line in your view, Mehran?
I mean, as far as laws and regulations go, if a person is to be found inadmissible to Canada, namely in this situation as a member of the terrorist organization, their immediate family would be found inadmissible as well, wife, children. So this is as far as laws and regulations go. Doesn't obviously apply to extended family members. In a humanitarian aspect of it, if you want to think about the humanitarian aspect of it, yes. I mean, we have so many examples of like sons and daughters of like dictators, or whatever have you, who would not necessarily support or share that the view of their parents. So yeah, I can understand as in a human level, I can understand that, yes, that could be an argument that it doesn't, if such and such as father is an IRGC commander, it doesn't necessarily mean that he or she would think the same. Yeah, but we always have to draw a line somewhere. As far as I said, the Canadian law says that if someone is found inadmissible, the immediate family would be inadmissible as well. And but again, chances are the daughter or son would not be necessarily would not share the ideology, or ideology is the word, but rather the niece or nephew would. So it's hard to just do the black and white. It's case by case. Overall, I think the laws, the Canadian laws, is basically would be the best point of reference, and anybody else who would be who should be basically treated as someone who can actually come into Canada, given a chance, and then we should see how they basically perform or they lead their lives. That's how I see it.
Sadeq, if somebody says to you there should be leniency for some kid who is a fitness instructor here who just happens to have a father that was involved in the regime or something, and you shouldn't necessarily blame the kid, you say what?
Yeah, as a lawyer, obviously, criminal responsibility, legal responsibility is individual. It really rests on the individual's actions. I mean, by a kid, you don't necessarily mean a kid.
No, I mean like a 20-something. Yeah.
But I want to mention also that a very important case, now we realize how important this was, that I was personally involved was the case of Ishaq Ghalibaf. Like, imagine this guy, like Ghalibaf, how important he is. And I've been shouting that this is the guy who will be the future Putin of Iran if you don't do anything about it. And then he was in the process of getting his PR. If it wasn't for our activism and awareness that we raised, that not only did this guy applied for PR, but applied for something we called application for judicial review for writ of mandamus, meaning he was suing, kind of like disputing the Immigration Canada that they are taking too long to issue his PR. And that is how we realized that this guy is in the PR process. And then the news came out. This was ridiculous. So this guy, Ishaq Ghalibaf, recently Guardian did a report on him. He is one of them. Like these guys, children of are one of the main pillars of their terrorist financing, channeling, and activism. So you at least what you need to be doing is to have very, very high scrutiny into whether they are linked with their parents or not. I can make another example. Mohsen Rezai's son defected from his father. He really, he is one of the guys, brilliant guy, got killed eventually by the Islamic Republic. And he started talking against his father, the Islamic Republic ideology, long before any of us even dared talking about these things. So definitely you have to distinguish between these two cases for sure.
From what I hear, and I'm going to ask you to validate this one way or another, the folks that are already here that we should be concerned about, that are connected to the regime, including mullahs, etc. There's little that will. I mean, the idea now is to try and stop more from coming in. That the prospects of deportations from Canada are extremely limited. Is that true, Mehran? And then Avideh, same question.
If I were the government, I would, because obviously you have to, in Farsi we say جلوی ضرر رو از هر جا بگیری منفعته. So you have to stop the influx of these regime. I want to call them, actually, if you want to think about it, I would call them dormant cells, like the ones that are coming in and they just be here, maybe live a somewhat normal life, buy a grocery store or whatever, and and then at certain point of time they become active. So the influx should be stopped for sure. But then at the same time, I think one thing that government has failed to be serious about was the fact that, I mean, according to government, we have 700 plus IRGC members living in country. So far, if I'm not mistaken, 21 were put, basically, I'm not even sure if they were removed or they're in the process of removal, something like this. So this is a huge gap between these numbers. If you're already, as a government, if you're aware of the number of the IRGC members, like at least top officials of IRGC, if you know that, then you have to put it as a high priority task to get rid of these people as soon as possible. The problem is that the influx should be stopped, but it has to just focus on those people who actually were members of IRGC. As Sadeq mentioned before, we have to distinguish between member of a terrorist organization and someone who had no choice but to serve their compulsory military service for 2 years. They should not be counted members. So once we fix this issue, and then define and give guidelines to the visa offices that, okay, what is the definition of a member? Stop them from coming in, and then try to sieve out and get rid of the known IRGC members within the country.
Avideh?
Well, I do not agree with that 100% because I believe that, for example, coming back to that children or family members of the IRGC people or the regime officials, where did this money that they bring here come from? Does it come from a salary, or is it coming from the oil revenue stolen from the Iranian people? Is it sanction evasion? Is it corruption that Iranian people pay in inflation, in poverty, in executions of the journalists to try to expose it? Or, I mean, we can debate blame all day, but there is no debate that the asset itself is the proceeds of crime. And Canada has laws about that. The Proceeds of Crime Act and the Special Economic Measures Act that say that we do not let people enjoy the fruits of stolen wealth. The question is whether we enforce these laws or keep pretending that they don't apply to the criminals coming from Iran.
What, Sadeq, did you want to weigh in on that at all?
Just generally, I completely agree with both. Actually, I don't think there's any radical disagreement. Proceeds of crime, ideology, anybody who is associated with that sort of like, if you know, I think they're putting the cart before the horse, because the main thing is whether you're associated with that ideology, which is about killing, the infidels and others. And then if you're a son of those people, you have to really have high scrutiny into whether they believe in that. You have to high scrutiny into whether, into their money, into their assets, where did that come from? So that is very important. My problem is that we are leaving the main thing, outside. We are not even dealing with these. All of these people are openly associated with the Islamic Republic, ideologically, financially, all of that. And then we are talking about some details about like the sons or the daughters or the conscripts. That's a total waste of time. That's a diversion policy. I think the liberals know what they're doing. They're just basically, in Farsi we say, they're sending us to Nokhotsia, something to, what is the equivalent in English? I don't know. They're just
a black hole.
No, it's just we are going for something that is irrelevant, and it's a diversion tactic.
Well, I remember. I mean, probably the most often asked question in the first 4 years of this show that I asked a number of folks, including Liberal Party members who would come on the show, and I would say, "Why is the IRGC not on the terrorist list? What's the issue?" Some of whom said, I don't know, as if wondrously, like with, but then when it finally happened, in whatever way it did happen, that there was some sort of announcement about some members of the IRGC are now going to be considered on the terrorist list, etc. My reaction at the time was, well, now it's going to be about enforcement. Otherwise, this doesn't mean anything. To which somebody actually took me to task when a government person said, well, you've been calling for this whole time. Now that we did it, you're blaming us and saying, you're not going to enforce it. But it seems like that's where we've gotten to. And I wonder, based on what the three of you have said today, for example, about broader issues in terms of what's popular politically and what isn't, do you believe that the situation, the ever-evolving situation right now with Iran and this war and the prospect of a deal, for example, and all of that, has an effect on whether this terrorist list will be enforced in Canada, will have an effect on who's let into this country? In other words, do those international you're nodding, Sadeq. So your answer to that is what?
Yeah, officially, the government used to say that one of the main reasons we are not, enlisting RGC as a terrorist organization is that because we want to have diplomatic negotiations, and if they are listed terrorists, we would have limited power in doing that. It's obvious. They said it. It's out there. So yes, it's all connected to the issue of negotiations, whether there's going to be a deal. They always want to do back channeling. That's dirty political, tricks that it's always being used. And I think for the Iranian community, that has been really harmful. Yeah.
So it's not just the prospect of a deal is not just how it affects things inside Iran. It can affect us here in Canada as well. Mehran, you would agree with that?
I would agree with that, and I could only hope that, as Sadeq previously mentioned, we have broken some amazing record in past few months in rallies throughout Canada. I'm only hoping that we could somehow keep this momentum and use it as a pressure to government to, because yes, once a deal is made, especially for Canada, it's less of a priority to pursue this uh, laws and basically enforcement of these laws at the level that we are still hoping for. It could only remember the whole Mehdi Taj thing happened. He was in the at the airport, and was had it not been for Iranian Canadian community
Yeah.
pressuring the CBSA on social media and basically spreading the news, he would have let in. I suspect. So I'm only hoping that we could use that momentum and keep pressure on the government to make sure that these laws are enforced. Actually,
It seems fair to say that on the face of it, the Canadian government, and maybe by extension, based on the information that's out there regularly in the mainstream media, et cetera, the Canadian people do not see a threat from the Islamic Republic regime the way Iranian Canadians do, and not just for Iranians, but I mean for the world. You know, have these stats that I've talked about on this show, of that National Post poll that came out, the Ipsos poll that came out about a month and a half ago, saying 20% of Gen Z in Canada supports the Islamic Republic regime. Not just anti-war, supports the regime. So in that context, it feels like there's almost a shrug about, well, you know, this is an internal issue for the Iranian community. They don't like these guys, but it's not bad news for us if a mullah turns up on our shores. Would you agree with that, Avideh, that that's the general culture that seems to be developing here?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that the biggest culprit of that is the media, because they do not report on the real situation. Journalists have become op-ed writers. They are motivated by their ideology of things rather than news. And the news is that there is no version of the Islamic Republic being moderated in any ways, with sanction reliefs, with talks, with negotiations. They do not respect, it's not in their DNA to respect agreements, and they would lie, they would just buy time, and they ultimately would do what they are supposed to do, which is destroying the Western civilization and taking over, basically. And I think that nobody really, like when I speak with my patients, for example, they all ask me, Avideh, what is going on in Iran? And because they don't know, because there is nothing being reported properly about Iran. And that's the reason I do my videos, and I personally try my best to inform people about what is going on in Iran. And I think that we have that responsibility to do that. But no wonder that people would eventually support the Iranian regime, because they don't know that they killed, for example, 40,000 people in 2 days. So they think that in this woke ideology,
or if they do know about it, they're told it didn't happen. That's inflated, and it didn't really happen. Thank you for that. Thank you to all three of you. I mean, I appreciate this conversation. I think it's a very important one that we're having, and I hope that we can blast it out to a lot of people out there. A final question to all three of you. I want to do this as an example of positive unity, Sadeq, not negative unity. If I could ask the three of you, I'll start with Mehran and then Avideh and Sadeq. Last word to you. What should Canada do right now? In other words, if you were advising the federal government tomorrow morning, you've got a meeting, and they say, what should we do? What should we do about this issue that you guys keep talking about? You would say what?
I think the Canadian immigration system needs fundamental changes. As an immigration accepting country, our economy, immigration is a pillar of Canadian economy. But it's been obvious for past decade or two, at least past 10 years. This system is broken. It's not functioning anymore, and it needs fundamental changes. What they've been doing, the liberal government for past 9-10 years, they just keep putting band-aid, or they would pass a law or regulation, and then once it fails, they would overcorrect it. I remember last time I was on Roqe, I addressed this issue. It needs fundamental changes, and once it's done, basically the due diligence on how to issue visa, especially for certain countries, for certain organizations, certain government officials, that would by itself it fall into place. I think the issue with the Canadian immigration system is far more grand than just the topic of our talk today. So I would suggest that we need to have some fundamental, basically changes into the whole immigration system.
All right. A tall ask for a meeting tomorrow morning with the federal government, but a legitimate one. Avideh, you would say what to them in terms of what Canada should do today?
I definitely agree with
Mehran.
everything that was said. Definitely, we need a full enforcement of the IRGC terrorist designation, not on paper, on the ground, with deportations, with frozen assets, with prosecutions, and a public inquiry into how regime of affiliated individuals entered and remained in Canada, and a mandatory disclosure of beneficial ownership for real estate. So the laundromat of the Iranian regime closes in Canada, and also sanction on individual regime officials and their enablers in Canada, including those who enjoy our hospitality while their masters murder our people. This is the minimum, and that is a test for the government. The government that fails this test is a government that, in effect, kept the door open for the IRGC to be able to keep coming into Canada.
All right. And final word to you, Sadeq. What should Canada do? What would be your advice to the federal government? Oh, you're muted, Sadeq. There you go.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so I can be very practical. Just a step they can take very short term, and that is essential. The U.S. is doing that within the Department of Homeland Security, within the FBI. There's a special unit just dedicated for the Iranian situation, because I've been hearing from the RCMP people, the Ontario people, officials, that we don't have enough knowledge, we don't have the expertise, we don't have the staff dedicated to this. So whether it is within the IRCC, Canada Immigration Canada, whether it is within the Ministry of Public Safety, whether any other organization dealing with security issues, security threats, immigration, I think this is the first step. If there's any seriousness in dealing with the issue, you can later decide about policy, what you want to do about it. But first, you have to know what's going on. And for that, they need specialized staff. You need a budget dedicated for this issue. And I think this needs to be a priority for Canada and for the Iranian community as a positive gesture of positive unity to ask the politicians, MPs, to deliver.
That sounds very practical suggestion. Thank you. Thank you, Sadeq. Thank you, Mehran. Thank you, Avideh. Nice to have you on for the first time. I appreciate all three of you and the time you've put into this. To be continued. Merci.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
It's happened a lot over the last few months where we're doing an episode, and I think that's the most important issue facing the Iranian community right now in the diaspora. And this episode is no exception, especially for Iranian Canadians. But as I said at the top of the show, this probably resonates for people in other parts of the world as well. where IRGC members or connected family members, etc., or mullahs themselves are infiltrating into the diaspora, into countries across the Western world, etc. This feels like a very, very important, relevant, important issue for us as a community right now. So big thanks to Mehran and Sadeq and Avideh for being part of this. We'd love to hear from you on this as well. By all means, share our content or respond to us. Get in touch with us to let us know your thoughts at info@roqemedia.com, info@roqemedia.com, or continue to post your thoughts and comments on any of our platforms on Apple, Spotify, SoundCloud, Castbox, Telegram, and of course on our Instagram channel, Roqe Media, and on our YouTube page. This is full time for this edition of Roqe. Thank you to the amazing core team who put this show together twice a week. Sabi Roham, the talented photo and video queen Tina Farahi, and the super talented Super P, Sanjarani. Special thanks as well to Smart Pega, Charming Kimia, Methodical Kaveh, talented Anahita, and thanks to TRK for your help, the Rising Keon. Thank you to all of you out there for supporting us and sharing our content. If you're not already a subscriber, it's easy to do. Just subscribe on any or all of our platforms and you'll get notified of upcoming Roqe shows, including Roqe Live, returning in July. We'll tell you more about that next week. You can find us on Instagram at Roqe Media. You can find me on my personal Instagram page at Jian Ghomeshi. And you can find this message right now coming to you from my late Uncle Mehran, Mizun Bashir.